Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto became a legend. When the seal broke and he opened his eyes, he had hoped to see his friends standing around him, welcoming him back to life. But now he's in a different time and all of his friends have long since passed away. Now the only thing he can do is put what he has been trained to be to good use and serve the galaxy from the shadows. Before we start, kindly like and subscribe to this channel and look over the description box for the author of this amazing storyline. Welcome aboard. Chapter 4, Waking Up in the Wrong Time. Location, Thesha. Hackett, Anderson, and Neji stood in front of a large window in the hospital. In the other room, lying on a table, was Naruto. He still wore the tracksuit they had found him in, his arms and legs several inches past the ends of the sleeves and pant legs. He wasn't wearing his headband, but they weren't concerned about that. They were more concerned about the man himself. How has he been coming along? Hackett asked a nearby doctor, Eiji Kaba. He sat in front of a screen which was monitoring the unconscious blonde's heart rate and brain activity. It was also checking an assortment of things on him, but it was only the heart rate and brain activity showing on the screen. He's improving, sir, Eiji replied, quickly checking another window on the computer. His muscles have completely recovered from the atrophy they were suffering from. But he won't be back to the speed he's used to until he gets some training done. Aside from the fact he hasn't had anything to eat or drink in a long time, all of his vitals have mostly recovered. The only thing we can do now is for him to wake up. Hard to believe we only brought him in 2 days ago when he's recovered this much, Anderson remarked. When they brought the unconscious man to the Ceres Republic Hospital, the men had all but kicked the doors down. They were yelling at everyone to get out of the way as they rushed the gurney carrying Naruto towards the elevator. If anyone had gotten in the way, they would have been run over. Thankfully, no one had been. The door behind them opened, making all in the room turn around and see who was coming in. It was an Asari and a Turian. The Asari's skin was a deep blue, and while she walked with grace only an Asari could pull off, she wore a stern look on her face. The Turian was encased in black armor that had red highlights. While his skin was also red, his facial markings were white and covered the majority of his face. Gentlemen, the Asari greeted them. Her voice was diplomatic, but it was clear on her face that she didn't want them here. Hackett looked at the Asari. Matriarch Moria, thank you for allowing us to use your facilities, he said with a respectful incline of his head. He knew who she was by reputation. Matriarch Moria Axia was one of the Ceres Republic's matriarchs and the head doctor at the hospital. However, she didn't think very highly of humans, especially when it came to chakra. One of her more famous quotes when it came to them was that they were a bunch of ignorant and idiotic creatures who didn't know when to give something to the professionals so it could be properly studied. The Alliance's reply was simple. They did hand it over to the professionals. It just so happened that none of them were on Thesha. Afterwards, both the Citadel Council and the other matriarchs told Moria, quite sternly, to keep her opinions to herself from that point on. So when she looked at the Admiral with thinly veiled annoyance and disgust, he knew why. How could I not, when your men threatened both concerned doctors and curious patients with death should they ever come near this part of the hospital? She replied archly. Both the human officers winced at that. She had a point there. Their men were being very protective of the man in the other room. I apologize for that, ma'am. The men are a little bit on edge, Anderson explained. I'd be too, if I was protecting a potential living legend, the Turian remarked as he walked up to the window. He looked at the sleeping man like he was analyzing a potential target. It was a habit that came from training. There's nothing potential about Naruto Uzumaki, Nilus, Hackett told him. He is a living legend. He doesn't look like much, he commented. It wasn't a derogatory comment by any means. It was one given by a professional who assessing someone. And Nilus Kryak, who was one of the most decorated Spectre agents alive, was very professional. Everyone who fought against him probably thought the same thing, Neji told him. They were either defeated or became an ally soon afterwards. Moria gave him a disbelieving look. He just had that effect on people. I know, I read the available records on him, the Turian replied. If half of what he did is true, I can see why many human children want to become shinobi. He frowned as he looked through the glass. I do have a question, though. I thought he was in his late teens when he ended the war. Why does he look like he's 24 or 25? Most likely the aging process was slowed down, AG said, looking at his screens instead of the people around him. He was in coma while he was still in the meteor. All that chakra it was giving was most likely to ensure he didn't wake up prematurely, acting like a giant cryogenic pod. The difference was that he wasn't frozen. His heart and vitals were still going at the normal rate. As a result, his chakra had slowed down his growth to the point he only aged a year every 338 years, if I did the math right. Granted, there was still some guesswork when he did the math work, but still. Even if you didn't, he's going to be in for a surprise when he wakes up and sees how much he's grown. I must admit, his recovery rate is astonishing, Moria remarked as she looked over the details of Naruto's recovery on a different computer. Has the Alliance come up with a new drug or medicine that helps the muscles recover from atrophy this quickly? If they had, she wondered how long it would take for the other races to get it. No ma'am, AG said after looking over at Hackett, who motioned him to talk. We haven't created any drugs or medicine like that. What? He had to be kidding. Yet, when she looked at him, she saw he was serious. Then is it a side effect from one of the other medicines you've given him to help in his recovery? He shook his head. Ma'am, we haven't given him any medicine at all. She looked at him, stunned. What? What do you mean you didn't give him any medicine to help his recovery? They couldn't just have left him alone on that slab in the other room. That would have meant he was recovering on his own. Which was impossible. When we got him onto the table and started up the computers to scan him, we saw that his chakra was already healing him. We didn't know how the chakra would react to medicine or treatment he didn't recognize, so we just let it run its course. That had been a long discussion, but all the doctors involved eventually agreed it was the safest course of action. So, he's been healing himself, and has been completely healed within 2 days. She asked like she couldn't believe what she heard. It was because she couldn't. I guess that part of the history books was true, Nilus commented. The books always said Naruto could recover from practically any injury. Have you told the rest of humanity about this? He asked Hackett, turning to face him. He shook his head. No, we're going to wait until he wakes up and gets all the rust he'll probably have off. The last thing we need is for this to become a media circus. They all wince at the thought. The paparazzi would be hounding them to get answers, not to mention the amount of people who would besiege the hospital just to get a look at him. Not to mention the Niners are going to have a conniption when they hear about him. Anderson muttered, earning looks of disgust and distaste from the other humans in the room. Anyone else wanna bet they're going to make the crash site into a holy place without giving a damn it's on the Asari home world? Ag asked, raising his hand. The other humans did the same. Nilus knew about the Church of the Nine. Supposedly it was a human religious sect that declared that the Biju were divine beings and that their Jinchuriki were both their avatars and their messengers. To them, Naruto had been chosen by all of the Biju to be the avatar of their completed form. He still wasn't sure what that meant, even though the history books had said something about a Jubi, and had left the earth so that he could properly learn how to harness the incredible power given to him. When he returned, he was to be the sword and shield of humanity, protecting them from any threats. That was what they preached anyway. In reality, the idea was they would use him as an excuse and figurehead to launch a holy war against the rest of the galaxy. It was well known that several members of the church were also members of the political party Terra Firma. Not a lot of the galaxy thought too highly of the church. Even their nickname was a derogatory slap against them. But they were still around, which meant they had connections. And now that their mythical savior was now real, they would probably do whatever they could to get their hands on him and use him for their own need. Personally, he hoped that this supposed legend wasn't gullible or stupid enough to believe them. As he mused about that, he noticed something going on with the blonde. What are his eyelids doing? He asked, getting everyone's attention. They looked like they were moving, but his eyes were still shut. Ag looked up at the window, starting to worry something had happened. Once he saw the eyelids, he calmed down. That's REM sleep, he explained. He's been like that for the past couple of hours. It just means he's dreaming. He lowered his gaze back to the computer screen in front of him. So, he's not unconscious anymore? He's just asleep? He asked for clarification. Yeah, that's the gist of. His voice trailed off when the computer in front of him started making a lot of noise. Whoa, what's going on? He asked himself. What's wrong, Dr. Kaba? Hackett asked him. According to the computer, his brain activity is spiking and he's pumping out a lot of adrenaline into his body. What does that mean, doctor? Anderson asked. Is he having some kind of dream? I'd say it's more along the lines of a memory. He could feel the power course through his body. And he could feel it trying to tear him apart. He could feel it attacking every single cell in his body, trying to destroy them and take their place. He fought back as best as he could, trying to stay human. But he was running out of time. Unless he was properly dealt with, he would lose control. Naruto. He heard someone shout his name. The sound of people landing on the ground around him filled his ears. He looked up and saw his friends surrounding him. They were stunned but also worried. Perfect timing, guys, he said with a grin. It disappeared when blood spilled out of his mouth. He spat out what was in his mouth. It left a bad taste. I appreciate you guys staying out of the fight when you got here. I don't think I could have fought Obito and made sure you were all safe at the same time. Get off your high horse, Dobe, his rival and best friend told him. Sasuke was smirking but it looked forced. We could have taken care of ourselves. Perhaps, but that doesn't matter now. He stifled a shout of pain as he felt the pure power he had torn out of Obito piece by piece try to engulf him. He had to stay in control. He had to force himself to stay in control of his own body. Did you guys all find what I had left for you? We did, Shino answered. Good, good. He growled as his arm grew bigger and blocker, turning white. The pain from that alone was enough to any man lose his mind and he had to deal with more than that. Look, you guys know what to do with it, so do it. He forced his will over his body, making his arm turn back to normal. Naruto, we don't need to do this. Ino protested. Lady Tsunade is only a few minutes away. If you can hold on, she can help you. Tsunade had come herself? He didn't think that would happen. That was rude. She would have come. I think we can both agree that I don't have a few minutes, Ino, he said with a small laugh. The laugh turned into a hacking cough, leaving blood on the ground. I don't think I even have a minute. Do you have any idea what you're asking us to do, man? Kiba asked, both anguished and angry. Course I know what I'm asking of you. I created the damn thing. He forced the pain down so he could focus on his friends standing around him. Besides, it's not like I'll be gone forever. He would come back. He made sure of it. But we won't know if you'll come back when we're still alive, Hinata objected. She looked like she was about to cry but was holding it back as best she could. But you all will still see me every time you look up the sky. It's not the same thing, Naruto, and you know it, Shikamaru told him. He looked at the Nara. He was still trying to figure out a way to stop this from happening, a plan that would save his friend. Don't try to think of a different way to fix this, Shikamaru, he replied quietly as he focused on his arm, forcing it back to normal. There isn't one, this is the only way. We can't just do that to you, buddy, Koji told him, tears flowing freely down his eyes. We can't imprison you like that. You have to. If you don't, then there's no guarantee I won't hold it back and not lose control. Of course, you can do it. You are Naruto Uzumaki, you will be able to hold it back alone with your flames of youth alone. Lee told him. He couldn't help but smile slightly at that. Lee, I don't think my flames of youth won't hold it alone, he said. Even though he was trying to look cheerful, they could tell he was forcing it. He was fighting for all he was worth for control and he was losing the fight. Hey, don't give me those looks, he admonished them. With this, the war will be over. That was what they had all wanted. The end of the war. The war that had continued for 2 long years. The war that continued after Obito had surprisingly quit the field and spent the next 2 years torturing Naruto to show that all he believed in was worthless, by either showing signs that he would target a random town and destroy it, often moments before the shinobi got there, or sending those who had flocked to his power to destroy just as they arrived, causing a battle to happen, where he would always observe from above where no one powerful enough could touch him, like a god observing mere mortals. The war where he had so effortlessly destroyed the revived Hokage in Madara Uchiha before stealing the half of Kurama from his father before he disintegrated and left, challenging anyone to come after him. The war where Naruto felt responsible for every attack, every village that had been burned to the ground, and pour everything he had into stopping his sensei's former teammate. And now, he had. Naruto, you have to fight it. You can win, you know you can. You don't need us to do this to you, Tenten told him. She didn't want to lose him, none of them wanted to. They still believed that he could win, that he could beat the thing trying to take control of him. While he probably could, there was only one way he could do it safely. I told you guys. This is the only way. He fell to his knees as horns began pushing out of his back, stretching against the fabric of his clothes. His cry of anguish and pain was cut off when he threw up blood. When the blood had finally stopped and he had forced the protrusions back down into his body, he simply sat there on his knees, looking at the earth beneath him. What are you waiting? He asked in a whisper, before looking up and looking at the one person who hadn't spoken so far. Do it, he told Sakura. She looked at her teammate. Even though he said the words like they were orders, she could tell that they weren't. They all could. He was begging them to do this to him, but he had spoken to her. She was the one to start it. But she just couldn't. Naruto. She began to say. He saw the hesitation in her eyes and grew angry at the sight. He didn't watch people he had thought of as friends and comrades die in front of his eyes, suffer uncountable nightmares in his sleep of those he had failed to save all those people from their ruined homes or watch them burn, pour every single kami-forsaken thing he had into finding and creating a way to defeat their enemy, break his contract with the Toads and turning his back on them to keep them safe, didn't walk away from the village to confront Obito on his own. He didn't throw his life away just so one person could show hesitation when the most important thing needed to be done. His anger fueled him, gave him strength to stand back up and stare straight into Sakura's eyes. Do it! He roared, his voice echoing in the wind. The hesitation vanished as she steeled herself. Flashing through hand seals, ignoring the others who were doing the same thing, the rest of the Konoha 12 slammed their fists into the ground. Fuinjutsu, Shinjutsu no Kaimusho, Sealing Jutsu, Prison of the New Moon. They cried in unison. Seal marks began to spread from where their fists touched the ground, connecting and intersecting each other. As the ground beneath them began to crack and rumble, he watched his friends run fast to get out of the seal's range. They leapt out of the crater and landed in front of the Shinobi Alliance, with the 5 Kage out in front. Before they could say anything, the earth before them tore itself out of the land, changing shape into a ball as it lifted itself up and up into the sky. Naruto sighed with relief as the earth all around him. He was safe from harming others. All right then, time to get to work, he thought to himself as he closed his eyes. He let himself turn inward, where that power was waiting with a snarl. It attacked and he met it head on. You wanna fight? Let's go. He opened his eyes and a pool of light tried to stab its way into his skull. With a cry of pain, he lifted his arm to cover his eyes. But his mind didn't know his body was older than it should have been. He accidentally rolled off the table and landed on the ground with a loud thud. He winced at the pain traveling through his body. Ow! That hurt! He mentally yelled. And why is the room too damn bright? Did they forget to lower the setting again? He reached out and felt for the table he had been on moments before. He felt a little better once he felt the cool metal underneath his hand. He heard a door open and someone run in. Lord Naruto? Are you all right? A familiar voice asked him from the other side of the table in flawless elemental. The first person he connected that voice to made him freeze. It couldn't have been him, could it? Niji, is that you? He asked, still covering his eyes. You're supposed to be dead. Did the others somehow find to bring you back to life? A feeling of dread filled him. Or am I dead too? Am I dead, Niji? Are you here to greet me in the afterlife? In spite of the situation, Niji chuckled at those words. There's no need to worry, Lord Naruto. You're not dead. But I am not the Niji Hyuga you knew, he told the hidden figure as gently as he could. Are you sure? You really sound like him. He still wasn't sure he wasn't talking to the Niji he knew. I'm fairly certain I'm not him. Okay then, not Niji, can you do something about the lights? They're too damn bright. It's like someone lit a fire and is holding it right in front my eyes. The blonde exclaimed. He took a chance and opened his eyes. The lights weren't so bad this time around. He could squint if he was careful. He looked at the table's metal and saw his reflection. He froze at the sight. Niji frowned and looked up at the lights. I'm sorry, but the lights only have one setting. They aren't that bright, though. Then I guess it's just my eyes then. He asked, coming out of his freeze. He turned around and pressed his back against the table, closing his eyes. He quickly patted the pockets of the now too small tracksuit. When did that happen? It took him a minute longer than it should have to find what he was looking for. Could you do me a favor and see if you can fix these? He reached up over his head and placed a pair of broken sunglasses on the table. Wouldn't you rather have a new pair of sunglasses, my lord? Niji asked as he looked at the glasses, which were oval in shape and had only the bridge as a frame. These look broken. The shades themselves were cracked and missing small pieces. A silence held the room. They belonged to B, Naruto said. He stiffened slightly, recognizing the name. And now, the broken sunglasses were much more recognizable. As you wish, sir. He reached out and took broken glasses. I'll have them repaired and back to you soon. He turned around and walked out of the room, closing the door behind him. How is he? Hackett asked the Hyuga. The door had closed behind him when he went inside and the room's speakers had been set to mute. They had a feeling if Naruto had started speaking, they wouldn't have understood him. Looked like they were right. He's just confused and annoyed at the lights. He replied. He's also wants these repaired. He held the sunglasses out for everyone to see. He said they belonged to B. The other humans in the room went still at that name. It left the Asari and the Turian a little puzzled. I'm sorry, but who is B? Nilus asked, curious at the name. It sounded important to them. Ag looked at him like he was an idiot. Then he remembered that the Turian didn't know human history. Lord Killer B was the brother to the Yondaime Raikage and the last Jinchuriki of the Hakubi. It was his death and the theft of the Hakubi that led to the final confrontation between Naruto Uzumaki and Obito Uchiha. Hackett informed him. We can have these repaired within the hour, Anderson said, taking the glasses from Niji. An hour and a half if we added something to it. Probably best to just repair them, he suggested. Anything more might freak him out. Good point. He walked over to the door leading outside the room, opened it and had a brief conversation with one of the guards, handing him the glasses. What is he doing? Moria asked as she watched the now conscious blonde stand up on shaky legs. He walked slowly around the room with one hand on the wall. His eyes were still closed and his pace showed how unsteady his legs were, but he kept his hand on the wall and took small deliberate steps. If I had to guess, I'd say he's measuring out the room, Nilus answered her question. He could see that with his vision impaired by the light, Naruto had no idea what the room looked like, so he had to figure out the basic details differently. That's smart of him, he silently complimented the blonde shinobi. Naruto wasn't really sure how long it had been since the guy who sounded like Niji had come in. If he had to guess, he'd say an hour, maybe a bit more. He had spent that time trying to figure out the exact size of the room he was in. Judging by the way he measured, he knew that it was a room small enough to only have one patient, but also big enough to have doctors possibly work on him. He also knew that there was a big window on one side with a door next to it. And since he heard voices on the other side of the window that fell silent when he was right up against it, he could tell that there were people watching him. He didn't know how many, but he knew they were there. After he had gotten the basic layout of the room, he sat back on the table. He began to examine himself by patting himself down all over. If Tsunade or Sakura saw me do this, they'd kill me. He thought to himself before stopping and realizing something. There was a very good chance that Tsunade was dead and Sakura could possibly be dead as well, or on her way. Stop it, Naruto, he told himself. You have no idea if they're alive or not. Don't go making assumptions when you don't even know the year. He continued with his examination. Well, nothing seems to be wrong with me, minus the fact that I've seemed to have gotten bigger. These clothes fit me the last time I checked. What happened there? He heard the sound of the door opening and someone walking in again. That you, not Niji? He asked without turning to face the guy. It would have been a little redundant since he couldn't see him anyway. Yes, it is, Lord Naruto, Niji answered. We've managed to fix the sunglasses. He placed the glasses in question on the table next to the blonde. That was fast. It only took an hour to get them fixed. He knew how badly damaged those glasses were when he picked them and carried them. You can thank technology for the speediness. He slowly reached out and took hold of the glasses, placing them over his eyes. This time, he could see the room without his eyes hurting. He turned and quickly looked at the room, filing away the details about the room that he had missed. He then looked over at Niji. Kami, are you sure you're not the Niji I know? You even look like the guy. It was a spitting image of his friend. Niji could only smile. I assure you, my lord, I'm not him. Would you stop it with the my lord already? You're making me feel old. Oh, the irony, the humans listening in on the conversation thought to themselves. Niji felt the same way but asked him something else. Well, how are you feeling then, Lord Naruto? He frowned at the tittle. Just call me Naruto, would ya? He wasn't sure if he could do that. But with the way the blonde was staring intently at him, he felt like he didn't have much of a choice. All right, Naruto, are you feeling all right? I feel a little stiff and sore, he admitted. I guess I was sealed for a long time then. The other shinobi turned solemn. Yes, you were. He didn't like that look he was seeing or the neutral tone in his voice. Don't beat about the bush. How long was I gone? He asked, nervous to hear the answer. Niji could understand that feeling. He would have felt the same way if he was in the same position. You've been sealed for 2024 years, he said gently. Naruto was blown back by the number. He knew he would be sealed for a good amount of years. But what he had expected was 50 years, maybe a century, not over 2 millennia. You mean I've spent just over 2,000 years orbiting the Earth? He demanded. That's impossible. I should have fallen from the sky a lot sooner than that. You made an error, Niji said quietly. What? What do you mean, I made an error? He demanded as the nervousness in his voice now had a bit of horror and panic mixed in. Oh boy. This felt a lot harder now. After you were sealed, the rest of the Konoha 12 had looked over the blueprints of the seal. It turns out that you had made a slight mistake when you drew it. But it was enough of a mistake to send you flying out into space rather than orbiting the Earth. I'm not even on Earth. He asked, sounding like he was a little child who couldn't believe what was being shown to him. He shook his head. No, you're on a planet called Thesha, home of a race called the Asari. In the past 3 decades, the human race has managed to reach up out into space, colonizing other planets. Since 2157 CE, we have been in contact with aliens and... Hold it. He shouted, waving his hands to stop the Hyuga. Too much information is being shoved into my brain at this point. I'm still trying to get over the fact that I'm not on Earth and I've sealed inside that rock for at least 2,000 years. He would have continued, if a large growl hadn't emanated from his stomach, cutting off his tirade and making him look embarrassed. Are you hungry? Niji asked him, feeling a little awkward. I guess, he replied, sheepishly scratching the back of his head. It had been over 2,000 years since he had food. Come on, I'll take you to the cafeteria. We can get you some food there. All right, lead the way. They walked out of the room, the Hyuga in the lead and the blonde behind him. Everyone at the table could only watch Naruto eat in stunned surprise. If this is his idea of a little hungry, I don't want to see how much would qualify for really hungry, Nilus commented in stunned amazement. I think he just underestimated himself. Being sealed for over 2,000 years could do that, Niji offered. Even so, he's on the verge of putting the Akimichi clan to shame, and that's saying something, Anderson replied. The subject of their discussion sat at the end of a nearby table. Naruto was eating everything and anything that was placed in front of him. Thankfully the cooks didn't give him any dextro-based food. The food was disappearing down his throat so fast that they were half afraid that he would eat through the table if something wasn't in front of them. Naruto looked up from what he was eating and said something to Niji, speaking in rapid elemental. Niji looked amused for a quick second and replied back, making the blonde nod in understanding and turning his attention back to his food. What did he say? Hackett asked Niji. Their translator couldn't translate the rapid elemental. He wanted to know who Nilus was, he answered shortly. Was that how he put it? No, he answered after thinking it over. What did he really say? Nilus asked. His translator couldn't translate the elemental either. He said, "Hey second Niji, who's the bird guy with the face paint?" They just stared at him before switching their gaze to the blonde, who was still eating without a care to them. We need to get him a translator, Stat, Anderson declared. Who the hell knows what would happen if he accidentally insulted someone? Probably a fight that'll end in a couple of seconds with him winning, Hackett answered with a straight face. What if he insults a Krogan? Nilus asked. Truth be told, he was actually interested in seeing that kind of fight. I'd guess it depends on the Krogan, Niji commented. Naruto would probably be able to beat a Krogan who had a short temper. But it was up in the air if he went up against a calm one or worse, a warlord. In any event, we need to get him a translator, Anderson repeated his previous statement. I've already told him about it and how it can be applied. When he heard about how it could be applied to jewelry, he gave me this. He pulled out a necklace that had a small green crystal on the end of it. While Nilus had no idea what it was, both Hackett and Anderson did. It was the necklace of the Shodaime Hokage, who gave it to his granddaughter Tsunade, who then gave it to Naruto. According to the history books, Naruto had searched every inch of where he fought pain looking for every single fragment of the crystal. When he found them all, he went to Mt. Mayaboku and asked the toadsmiths to repair it, which they did much to his relief. He told me that we could install a translator in it. But he also warned me that if we break it while trying to install the translator, he will kill us slowly and horribly. That's understandable, Hackett said as he took the necklace from his hands. I'll have a technician install the latest translating software into it and caution them to be very careful with it. He turned around and walked out of the cafeteria, secretly glad he could stop watching Naruto fill a hunger that was over 2,000 years in the making. Well, that takes care of the translation problem, Nilus remarked. That may be, but he also asked for an elemental to English translation book so he could study it, Niji told him. He had told the blonde about the different language he was speaking when he briefly spoken with Hackett and Anderson when they first passed them. After he heard that there was a new language that practically every human knew, he had asked for the translation book with a grimace. I may have to learn a new language, but that doesn't mean I'm going to enjoy the process, he had told Niji. I can see why he would want such a book, Anderson commented. He doesn't want to rely too heavily on the translator. Did you tell him about the Omni tool? He shook his head. No, I figure we'd wait until he was back at full strength before talking to him about modern weapons and equipment. As he said so succinctly before, too much information is being shoved into my brain at this point. The other two chuckled at that. Hey, not Niji, where's the bathroom? Naruto asked from where he sat, the food in front of him all finished. It's just down the hall and on the first left, he answered promptly. Why do you want to know? I just realized that I haven't answered nature's call for over 2,000 years and all the food I just ate probably won't help. He stood and quickly bolted for the door. See you in an hour, probably. He shouted as the door closed behind him. They could only stare at the door as they heard the sounds of his footsteps echoing in the hall. What was that all about? Nilus asked, mystified at what he had just seen and still vaguely annoyed that his translator couldn't translate the elemental the blonde was spewing fast enough. He had to go to the bathroom, Niji answered shortly. Apparently, he had just remembered that he had a bladder which was very full. We'll see him in an hour, probably. Who knew how long that bladder would empty? By the time Naruto got out of the bathroom, night had fallen on the new planet he was on. He had been given a new room that had a bed along with a table and a chair. He had a nice view of the city, which looked strange to him, and the bed was actually quite comfy. But the windows themselves were locked and there were 2 armed guards outside his down. He didn't know what the fuss was all about. It wasn't like he was going to try and escape. Where would he go in the first place? Sighing, he sat down at the table. He still had trouble believing everything he had heard. He was on a different planet, in a completely different part of the galaxy, and it had been 2024 years since he had been sealed. A part of him still hoped that this was all part of an incredibly bad dream, forcing him to dream it because he had been stuck inside the meteor for so long. It was that part of him that hoped he would wake up and see all of his friends around his bed, welcoming him back. But he knew that this was no dream, hallucination, or even a genjutsu. This was reality and he was stuck with it. He knew that the men in blue military uniforms as well as the strange bird-looking alien, which he had been told was something called a Turian, whatever that was, wanted something from him. Why else would they release the seal and free him? It sure wasn't for publicity's sake, that was for sure. But he knew that if he wanted to know the answer, he would have to stick around. But it would probably be difficult for him. It already was. Every time he looked at not Niji, he saw the one he knew. He kept being reminded of the times the two had been through, both good and bad. But most of all, he was reminded of how he had died in his arms during the war. Despite his claims to everyone that he was okay, the memory of Niji's death was one of the many things that haunted his dreams. Every time he saw it, he tried to stop it, to change it somehow. But in the end, it didn't matter. A friend was dead and Obito was watching from on high. "Knock it off, Naruto," he berated himself. "You defeated Obito and won the war. There's no point in mourning Niji's death anymore. The rest of them are dead as well. You'll just have to move on." He said this to himself, but a thought kept looming around in his mind. If he had met a person who looked like the Niji he knew, what if there were others just like him? People who had faces so familiar to him, but didn't know who he was. It was a frightening thought and a horrible one as well. He shook his head vigorously, shaking himself free of that train of thought. "I need something to distract me," he thought to himself. Looking over at the other side of the table, he saw the book that not Niji had given him. It was the translation book that he had asked for. He wouldn't his necklace back until the next morning. Apparently it takes longer to install a translator in a piece of jewelry than to repair a pair of sunglasses, so it was probably a good idea to make use of the book in front of him. He took it in his hands, placed it in front of him on the table, and opened to the first page. Chapter 5, Nothing's really changed, has it? Niji walked to the room they had put Naruto in. It had felt like a long night, with Hanabi being all excited to move to Konoha and him worrying about the necklace of the Shodaime Hokage being broken when they tried to insert the translator. He made it a point to take death threats from legends very seriously. Thankfully, the worry had been for naught. The translator had been successfully installed in the necklace. "Morning guys," he greeted the guards standing in front of Naruto's door. "How's it been?" "The only thing we really heard was a lot of mumbling and the occasional curse. Other than that, it's been pretty quiet," the guard on the left answered his question. "Has anyone tried to visit him?" They knew that despite their best attempts at keeping it quiet, someone always finds out. "Only a couple of doctors who were curious about why we were guarding a room," the guard on the right answered. "We told them we were guarding a VIP who wanted to remain anonymous. They didn't push after that." "All right, thanks for letting me know." He walked past the guards and into the room. He found Naruto fast asleep with his head on top of the translation book. He hoped he didn't drool on the book. It wasn't his to begin with. "Naruto, you have to wake up." He shook the blonde slightly. Naruto came awake in an instant. As he slowly raised his head, getting the grogginess out, he noticed Niji standing over him. Good morning, he said, trying to use some of the English he had learned during the night. He had learned a couple of words, but that was all so far. Spent the night trying to learn English. Niji asked the mandatory rhetorical question. His accent was thick and he struggled to say the words. Naruto was about to say yes but decided against it and just nodded his head. This should help you out immensely. Niji handed him the Shodame's necklace. He took and placed it around his necklace. As he did, he heard a faint peeping in his ears. Where's that noise coming from? He asked with a little annoyance. It's just the translator getting started. It's nothing to worry about, the Hyuga assured him. Are you sure? How was the bed? He asked, switching to English. The blonde looked at him with an odd look. What are you talking about? I fell asleep at the table. You saw that, he answered, unaware that Niji had switched languages. Yes, I did. But I was making sure the translator was working. It is? He asked, surprised. The peeping had disappeared, but he hadn't really noticed. It had sounded like Niji had been speaking elemental the entire time. Kami, that's impressive. That it is. But you should probably still study the dictionary, just in case you ever lose the necklace. Yeah, you've got a point. He could already tell it was going to be hard and painful. But he still had to do it. Anyway, time for the food. He declared, walking towards the door. After you, Naruto, Niji said as he followed the blonde. I hope he isn't as hungry as he was yesterday, he mentally prayed. They walked through the door and out into the hallway, the two guards falling in behind them. As they walked down the hall, three members of the group could only chuckle silently as the fourth kept looking around in amazement. Naruto was still surprised by all the things he saw. He kept looking at different things. When he passed a Solarian or a Turian, he had a look of wonder on his face, although when he passed a Volus, he also had a look of stunned confusion. Whenever he passed by an Asari, he felt awkward and embarrassed by the grace they held themselves with. Unknown to him, he was making a few of them turn their heads to look at him as he walked by. As they walked into the cafeteria, the guards taking position outside the entrance, they saw Hanabi sitting with her grandfather. Daddy, over here. She called out when she saw the two of them. Niji smiled as he saw his daughter. Give us a moment, Hanabi, he called back. We need to get breakfast, and then we'll sit with you. He and Naruto walked over to the line and got their breakfast. That's your daughter? Naruto asked as they put food on their plates. Is she adopted or something? No, she's not adopted. She is fully my daughter. He threw a quick look back at the child. But she's an Asari, isn't she? Asari adults were beautiful. Asari kids were cute. She did have the eyes of Hyuga, though. Ah, that's right. I forgot you don't know much about the Asari. He shrugged his shoulders. I know they're very attractive and have a grace that makes me feel like a clumsy idiot, although, that last part might be because of girls in general. He didn't have a lot of experience in that area. Oh, don't worry. They make us all feel like that. But back to the point, when an Asari is born, they are 100% Asari. They don't receive anything from the father. Really? Nothing. He looked again. Father and daughter had the same eyes. Niji noticed what he was seeing. That's what they say. Of course, that's in debate right now. What happened? The blonde asked as they made their way back to the table. You showed up, he answered quietly, so only the blonde could hear him as they sat down at the table. In any case, I would like you to meet my daughter, Hanabi, and my grandfather, Hisashi. He introduced the two at the table. Not to be rude, but the Hyuga can be a little more original when it comes to names, right? Naruto asked, looking at him across the table. It had been over 2,000 years since he had been sealed and he was still hearing the same names. It was almost freaky. Before Niji could speak, Hanabi did. I know who you are. You're Naruto Uzumaki. She blurted out. When she did, both her father and grandfather were glad that they were the only ones in the cafeteria at that point. An outburst like was just begging for the media to show up if someone else heard it. Before either one of them could reprimand her, Naruto smiled. And how do you know that, kid? He asked her with a smile, like it was amusing to hear her say that. She was so excited at the prospect of him there that she ignored the comment about her being little. I read about you the entire time. You're in my favorite books. She pulled out a book and showed it to him. He took it from her hands and read the title. The Tales of the Konoha 12, Volume 2. He looked over at Niji and Hisashi. They put the stuff we did in print. He was stunned by that. Some of the stuff they had done wasn't pretty, especially during the war. Okami, did this have the suicide wagon in it? They edited some of the material so it wasn't so graphic. Hisashi assured him. The series is actually a bestseller. Wow, really? I guess I should be flattered. He looked over at Hanabi. Which one is your favorite story? He asked her. I can't decide. They're all so good. She replied, annoyed by the fact. Every time she tried to pick her favorite, another story popped into her mind and argued how it should be her favorite. Then another popped in and then another until it was just a distracting mess inside her own head. Well then let's start simple. Do you like any of the stories with me in it? It was probably vain to ask such a thing, but he was curious about it. I like the one where you fought against pain in the center of Konoha. She looked at him with odd eyes. That must have been terrifying even though you kept fighting. Wow, she went straight for that. She must have thought that even though it was terrifying, it was still cool. That's not what he remembered. He could still see the destroyed village all around him when he thought about that fight. But she didn't want to hear that. I was more angry than scared, if I have to be honest, he admitted. Until he had talked to Nagato, he was full of anger at him for the loss of his sensei. Is the story of Team 7's first mission in there? He asked, changing the subject before things felt awkward. She shook her head. No, that's in the first book. But that's a good one. I can't wait to start training to be a shinobi, that way I can be just you, Mr. Naruto. She declared, making her father and grandfather look slightly uncomfortable. That's good to hear. He noticed the uncomfortable looks on Niji and Hisashi. What? Did I say something wrong? It's not that you said anything wrong, Lord Naruto, Hisashi told him. It's just that Hanabi's situation about becoming a shinobi is a bit unique. What do you mean by that? And don't call me Lord, he quickly added. Remember when I said the fact that Asari children didn't get anything from the father was in debate? Niji asked him. He nodded and the Hyuga continued. Usually, an Asari has something called element 0 or Izo naturally in them when they're born. A few days ago, Hanabi lost all of her Izo. It was replaced with chakra, which only humans have had for the 2,000 years. He connected the dots when he heard those words and realized what that meant. I caused that, didn't I? He asked quietly. He wasn't sure how he did, but he had a gut feeling that was his fault. Daddy, don't make it sound like he did something bad. Hanabi admonished her father. Besides, I'm going to be the first Asari shinobi because of it, so it's all thanks to him. You will not have as much chakra as the other students, Hanabi. Remember that, Hisashi told her. So? If I can't use my chakra as much as they can, then I'll be just like Rock Lee. She declared. Naruto, who was in the midst of taking a drink, decided to offer a sacrifice to the spit-take gods. Thankfully he aimed towards the side and didn't hit anyone. As he coughed out the rest of the water, the others just stared at him. Sorry, but that was the first time I've ever someone say that they wanted to be like Rock Lee. He was still having trouble comprehending it. What's wrong with Rock Lee? I've read about him. He was an amazing shinobi who could only barely use his chakra, so he focused completely on learning taijutsu. And that was awesome, just awesome. While he knew what she was talking about, he had a leg up on her. I know about Rock Lee, I fought with him. Reading about Lee and personally knowing Lee are two completely different things, Hanabi, he told her in a matter-of-fact tone. It's one thing to read about how he acted and it's another to see it in person. The number of times he had seen Lee go off was enough for him to lose count. I could probably imitate Bushy Brows when he started going on one of his rants. Bushy Brows? Asked Hisashi. My own nickname for him, he answered shortly. Can you show us what Rock Lee was like? Hanabi asked. She had already met a living legend and now there was an opportunity to get a glimpse at what another legend was like. She wasn't about to let this opportunity pass. Naruto, on the other hand, wasn't so sure about that. That's probably not a good idea. Oh, come on, please. She pleaded, hope shining in her eyes. He knew it was going to be a losing battle if he kept refusing. If he did, he was fairly certain that she would pull out the weapon that is in every woman's arsenal, the weapon that is to be feared and respected by men everywhere. All right, but don't say I didn't warn you. He swallowed the food in his mouth, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath. Then, he gave her what she wanted. I can see that you are all in the springtime of your youth. He shouted, opening his eyes. To honor your youthfulness, I will run 400 laps around the city in 5 minutes. If I cannot do that, I will do 5,000 push-ups with my hands tied together. And if I cannot do that, I will do 60,000 laps around the planet on my hands while blindfolded. And if I cannot do that, I will. Okay, we get the point. Please stop that now. Neji begged him while he was in mid-tirade. He was half afraid that the blonde would actually do those things if they let him continue. His daughter was glued to her seat, somewhere between fascination and horror at the sight. Just be glad I don't know how he managed to create that Kami-forsaken sunset, he said with a fox-like grin. He remembered when Lee had managed to make a group of hardened bandits surrender just by describing how youthful it was to have captured them and caused the sunset to happen. There had been some serious debate on whether or not he should have been in the interrogation unit for that trick alone. Guy put his foot down and said no at that. Was Rock Lee really like that? Hanabi asked, stunned beyond belief. While she had read about how Lee was like, Naruto was right. It was completely different in real life. No, he was worse. He once tried to run 5 laps around the entire land of fire within 1 day, he told her. He managed to do it, but he ended up being unconscious for the next week and a half. The people who hadn't known Lee were amazed that he was that fast. The people who did know him were amazed that he had done something so stupid. Wow. She was awestruck by what she heard. On the one hand, if she could go back in time, she would do so in order to watch what Naruto had just described. On the other hand, she also kinda didn't want to because she would be freaked out and disturbed by what she saw. By the way, am I going to have to stay in the hospital today? The blonde asked Neji. Even though he had only been awake for a day, it already felt like he was about to go stir-crazy. Add to the fact that the only thing he had seen for the first time in over 2,000 years was the inside of this hospital and he had grounds. Truth be told, Neji had been expecting this question. But he had been expecting it a day later. Well, if you're up for it, it would probably be best if we took you clothes shopping. He looked pointedly at the 2 small tracksuit Naruto still wore. He glanced down too. Agreed, I don't think that I can wear these much longer. I think they're beginning to chafe. Then we'll go after we're done here with breakfast. The food on their plates was just about done anyways. Naruto was trying his hardest not to gawk at the buildings surrounding him as he, Neji, and Hanabi walked down the street. Kami, this is what an outsider must have felt like when they came into Konoha, he thought to himself. Although, Konoha feels like a small town compared to this place. The streets went everywhere and were filled with all sorts of different aliens. Some he knew, the others not so much. When he saw a Hanner, he had asked Neji what the hell a jellyfish was doing on land. For him, the best course of action was to keep his eyes straight and not give anyone weird looks, even though people were giving him odds ones because of his tracksuit. How far away is this store of yours, Neji? He asked the Hyuga, deciding not to call him not Neji anymore. After all, his Neji was dead, had been for a long time. It should be nearby. Don't worry. This shop has been able to help Shinobi find the right clothes for the job ever since we started coming here, he assured the blonde. I hope so, I think my rear is about to show itself to the public. The pants were beginning to feel tight across his ass and he was half afraid of a tear, because that was something he needed right now, a pair of 2 small pants ripping open in the middle of the street. They kept walking and they kept passing other people. Most were still giving him odd looks, but some of the Assyrian humans, both male and female, which was something that made him a little nervous, were trying to undress him with their eyes. All they'd have to do is wait for one rip to happen and they'll see everything. He mentally complained. He would have felt flattered if he wasn't so worried about not making a scene. Streaking naked through crowds was not something he really wanted to do. And here we are, Niji declared as they stood outside a store. The sign was in an alien language, so Naruto couldn't read it. Great, more languages I'll have to learn, he silently groaned. The door was open and people would walk either in or out, so he could tell that it was a popular place. They walked in. Before Naruto could take in the size and scope of the place, only able to note it was big, a Nasari with a name tag walked up to them. "Welcome to Fashion Galaxy." She greeted them with a smile that made Naruto blush a little. "How may we help you?" "Hello, Alania," Niji greeted her, reading the name tag. "My friend here needs a new set of clothes." He gestured over at Naruto, who was the center of attention due to the small tracksuit he was wearing. "Oh my," she said as she looked him over, in a professional way. "What in Athame's name happened?" "Laundry accident. The rest of my clothes was set on fire and this one shrunk on me within 5 minutes of putting it on," he lied, straight-faced. It helped that his eyes were covered by the shades. The looks on people around him had all the same expression. They believed him. His story sounded too ridiculous to be a fake one. "Then you've come to the right place. Please follow me." She turned and walked into the store. Naruto turned to look briefly at Niji, who motioned him to follow her, and went after her. They walked deeper into the store, passing multiple racks of clothes. They were so far in, he lost sight of the entrance. "Do you have a preferred brand of clothing, sir?" she asked as they walked. Not really, no," he answered. He was guessing that the brands he knew were non-existent in this day and age. "I see." He could hear the disdain creeping into her voice. He was guessing that she was something of a fashion freak and was a little annoyed that he wasn't really helping her out. "Well, in that case, we'll make it easy for you." She somehow managed to make that sound like an insult. She changed course, turning to the right. When she stopped, she told him, "The changing rooms are over there." She gestured to where the changing rooms were, up against the wall. "Inside each room is a six who can help you with picking out the clothes you desire." "Thanks, Alania," he told her with a smile that made her blush a little and lose her condensation. He walked into one of the changing rooms, closing the door behind him. Because of store policy, she had to wait until he was done, in case he needed an opinion or a suggestion. As she was a professional, she didn't say anything. She waited as the minutes passed, turning into a half hour, listening to the taping in the room and the mutterings that came with it. While she waited, Niji and Hanabi, who had done a little shopping themselves, walked up. "I take it he's in there?" Niji asked her. The sound of Naruto trying to get out of his clothes and sandals was answer enough. The sounds kept going for another good 2 minutes, getting more frustrated as time went on. "Oh, this isn't going anywhere," they heard Naruto all but growl inside the room. "Hey Niji, are you out there?" he shouted through the door. How did he know that he was out here? "I'm right here," he answered. "Good. Do me a favor and hold on to these." A hand appeared at the bottom. It held a pouch, a white swirl with a red tassel inserted on one side, a holster that looked like it still had stuff inside, and the bandages that held the holster. Niji took the items and the hand swiftly disappeared. They soon heard the sound of a kunai tearing through clothes. Alania stared at the room, stunned. Is he cutting himself out of the clothes?" she asked. She had seen that the clothes were small on him, but she had thought he would have been able to get out of them without destroying them. "It sure does sound like it," Hanabi chirped cheerfully. Actually, that sounded kinda cool. Would that be something she would have to do as a shinobi? "Hey daddy, when we're done here, can we go over to that electronic store?" she asked. "I want to see if that new album from Biju came out yet." "We might, Hanabi," he told her. "It kinda depends on our friend in the changing room." They looked over at the door, where they could hear the muffled sounds of someone tapping a keyboard or screen. It sounded it was getting more and more agitated. "Kami take it, I said functional, not fashionable, you stupid machine." Naruto suddenly shouted, making everyone who was in hearing distance almost jump away in surprise. There's a difference. Everyone looked at the changing room and then at the nearby human like he was responsible. Sorry about that, Niji said with a strained smile. He gets a little excited sometimes. While the others just scowled in their direction, Elenia just gave them a strained smile as well. After that little outburst, they spent the next half hour in silence. There were no more outbursts from the changing room, just the muffled taping. The other people in the shop didn't pay any more attention to them, they went about their business, picking out articles of clothing, looking at them, and possibly buying them. Okay, I'm coming out, Naruto announced, getting the attention of Niji, Hanabi, and Elenia. He opened the changing room door and stepped out. Elenia's breath hitched as she stared at the blonde standing in front of her. Goddess, he's handsome. She thought to herself. The tracksuit and the sandals that made him look odd and slightly comedic were gone, they could see the remains of those on the ground behind him. Naruto now wore a black turtleneck shirt over his torso. On his right sleeve, going from his shoulder to the end of the sleeve, was a thick orange-colored stripe. Instead of sandals, he wore steel-toed combat boots. He also wore black cargo pants, which had a black belt encircling the waist. The belt's buckle was the leaf sigil of Konoha, shined so it looked like silver. From the knee down, the pants had a design of a fire encircling the entire bottom half of the pants leg. Both the color of the fire and the stripe on his shirt were the same color, that of an orange that you could only find if you looked at a fire. He wore fingerless gloves on his hands that had metal plates sewn into it. All in all, he cut an impressive figure. Well? How do I look? He asked, spreading his arms slightly. The shirt was slightly skin-tight, so his muscles could be seen somewhat. It was also tucked into the pants, making it appear as almost seamless. If one looked, they could see where the shirt ended and the pants began. You look really cool, Hanabi declared with a big grin. But it's missing something, I'm not sure what. She looked him up and down, trying to figure out what he was missing. I think I know what it is. He took the items he gave to Niji back. With practiced ease, he rewrapped the bandages around his leg and reattached the holster over them. He put the pouch where it belonged, on the back of his pants. He held the swirl in his hands for a brief moment, looking at it and considering it, before gently putting it in one of the cargo pockets. He turned back to the changing room, where the remains of his former clothes were. He grabbed the kunao laying there in one of the sleeves. With a few quick cuts, he had separated a long strip from the rest of it and tied it around his forehead, creating a bandana. Better? He asked Hanabi, putting the kunao away. She gave him 2 thumbs up. Much better, she declared. Well, that's good to know. It actually felt a little better to have that feeling back on his head, minus the weight of the metal plate. During his fight against Obito, his headband had somehow been knocked off his head, he still wasn't sure how that happened. He didn't have the time to look for it and he had to reluctantly admit there was a good chance of it being lost or destroyed. But that wasn't something he could lament about. As he came out of his musings, he noticed that Elenia was staring at him with a look of wonder and a little lust. Is something the matter? He asked her. No. Nothing's the matter, nothing. She hastily assured him. He wasn't quite sure about that. He had seen that kind of look before. While it had originally started after he had defeated Pain, it really became common during the war. Girls would keep looking at him like that, but he had never really taken notice of it, mostly because there was always something to do and he didn't really have time to stop and wonder what was up with them. Okay, if you say so. He turned to look at Niji. Are you going to pay for this? He shook his head. No, the Alliance will foot the bill. But what do you want to do with the remains of your old clothes? We'll take care of them, Elenia assured them. Fashion Galaxy has a policy of recycling old clothes to make new ones, so there's no need to worry. Thank you, Naruto said, tearing his gaze away from the remains. While he was glad to be out of them, those clothes reminded him of days with his friends. And he didn't want to remember those days right now. It was still painful. Well, I'm good here, he told Niji. Are you sure? Yeah, if I need any more clothes, I'll just get them later. He looked over at the saleswoman. "Thanks for helping me out, Alania," he said gratefully. She blushed, and avoided eye contact, mumbling about how it wasn't a problem. They left the store, with many people watching the blonde as they went. It was weird, but Naruto tried not to think about it. "I hope you don't mind, but Hanabi wants to check something out in the electronics store," Niji asked as they walked back out onto the street. "It's the store just down there." He pointed out the store down the street. It looked a little smaller than Fashion Galaxy. "It's not a problem," he assured him. They walked down the street and into the electronics store. Hanabi all but lit up when they walked in. She quickly went deeper into the store, despite the protest from her father. "You go after her. I'll just stay near the front," Naruto told him. He nodded with gratitude and went after her. The blonde looked around the store and saw something that caught his eye. He walked over to what looked like the video section, although it didn't look like any videotapes were there. He reached out and picked up a case. On the front of the case were two actors who suspiciously looked like Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha standing together over the beginning of Konoha. "I see you've found the 12th season of Shinobi," Avalis said to him as he walked up to him, his breath hissing between words. "That is one of the more famous seasons, as it has to deal with the final days of the clan wars and the creation of Konohagakure. Are you interested in buying it?" "Oh, no, I was just looking," he answered, still surprised that his village's past had become something to watch. "Can you tell me more about this series?" he asked the Valis. "I would have thought you'd know more about than me, sir. After all, it's a part of your history. I've been a little out of touch and I've never really paid attention to other thought was good on TV," he lied. It was true, for the most part. At first, he never had enough money to buy a TV, and by the time he could, there were more important things to worry about. Well, the series has been well received and has also won numerous awards. When it first began, the series creators wanted to stay true to the history of the shinobi as closely as possible, a procedure that has followed into the current season. "Where in the history of shinobi did this series begin?" he asked, now genuinely curious. "If I remember correctly, the first season began with the grandfathers of the founders of Konohagakure. It took them that long to get from the grandfathers to the actual founders themselves." The Valis saw his confusion and quickly explained it. "What I mean to say is that was the time period in which they began. The series doesn't just focus on one group of shinobo. It focuses on all of them, going from father to son and from clan to village. That's a part of what makes it so good. It shows the different views the characters have on situations as well as the troubles that haunted them. Multiple stories are being told at the same time and they're intertwined. You'd think that would have ended when it got to the creation of the hidden villages, but it did the opposite. More of them were created. Can you tell me what season they're on now? If it had gotten to when he was alive, he would be nervous. If I remember correctly, the 19th season is currently in production. It should pick up at the ending of the Third Shinobi World War. Thank Kami, I have time, he thought to himself. That was comforting. Do they actually have chakra and jutsu in this series? When they can, the salesman answered. If there is a jutsu that needs to be used and the actor cannot do it, special effects take care of the problem. Wait, the actors can use chakra. He was honestly surprised by that. When he was younger, only shinobi and samurai utilized chakra. The Valis nodded. That's one of the interesting things of the series. They use actual shinobi stationed on or around Earth to fill in the roles and clan members to be their ancestors. It's quite ingenious on their part. You sound like a fan, he remarked. Maybe it was because he was still getting used to this new time, but that was surprising. Many non-humans are fans of this series. It was already in its third season when the Alliance joined the galactic community. It allowed many of us to see where a part of your race came from and what their ancestors did. And I'm guessing it was the only way your scientists to study chakra. Niji had briefed him about that part of galactic politics as they made their way into the city. He would have to be careful about what he did, at least around scientists. Luckily, he had been around enough of them to know what they look like, in any species. I don't know about that, but I do know that some scientists are fans of the show. So, will you be buying it? No, I won't. He put the case back. I think I'd best start with the first season and I don't see it here. The Valis nodded apologetically. Yes, unfortunately, we have run out of stock for that season. I apologize for the trouble. There's no trouble. Thank you for helping me out. It was my pleasure, sir. He turned around and walked away. As he made his way back over to the entrance, Naruto saw Neji and Hanabi coming back towards him. Hey, did you find what you were looking for? He asked. Unfortunately, no we didn't. The album Hanabi was looking for hasn't been released yet. Neji replied. Oh, sorry, Hanabi, he told her with an apologetic smile. She had seemed to be looking forward to it when they came in. It's okay. With any luck, it'll come out before I leave for Earth, she said with a smile. What was the album you wanted? He asked as they walked back onto the street. He was kinda curious about what kind of music was played in this era. It's the newest album of my most absolute favorite band, Biju. She declared happily. It's called Double Down. If he hadn't stopped walking when he heard that, he would have walked into a wall. There's a band called Biju? He asked in stunned wonder. Yeah, the Masters of Rock. And yes, that includes Doton. Huh. That just flew right by him. Neji smiled. It's an old joke about the band, he told the blonde. Don't worry about it. His daughter was more focused on the fact that the legend beside her didn't know about her favorite band. They're the hottest band out there. And the cool thing is that they're a mixture of races. They've got Asari, Turians, Solarians, Quarians, humans and even a Krogan. Naruto didn't say anything. He was still too stunned to say a word. It was becoming a bit of a concern for her. Daddy, I think I broke him, she told her father. More than 2,000 years ago, they were spoken in fear and whispers. Now, they're a music group, Naruto said, mostly to himself. I honestly don't know if I should laugh at that or not. Hey, don't laugh. They're a great group. She told him vehemently, shaking her fist at him. She wouldn't punch him. She just wanted to emphasize her point. Sorry, I'll stop. Kami, you definitely live to your name, Hanabi, he said with a grin infectious enough to make the other two in the group smile. Anyway, is there a library nearby? He asked Neji, the grin sliding off his face as he became serious again. Why do you need a library? The Hyuga asked. He knew that Naruto was not a fan of books, so the fact that he was asking for a library was a little odd. I am way behind on the times. I need to catch up, he answered simply. He wouldn't be a shinobi if he didn't do some research. That was a fact that was almost literally beaten into his skull. They took an air cab to the biggest library in the city, the Ceres Republic Library. This place is huge. Naruto thought to himself in amazement. The moment they walked into the place they could see the full majesty of the library. The place looked like it had at least 5 floors, possibly even more. The layout was a rising circular design, going upwards in a spiral if a person wanted to use the stairs. Books lined the shelves and the shelves were everywhere. The only place the books weren't at was the center, an empty space that projected upwards to the ceiling. He gawked for a moment longer before coming back to his senses and walked over to the front desk. That was the gate he needed to pass before he got into the library. Excuse me, can I help you? The librarian sitting at the desk asked them. Yes, can you tell me where your history and culture books are? Naruto asked her. There was a lot of stuff he needed to know, but it was best if he started off slow, relatively speaking. What history and culture are you looking for, sir? Human? Turian? Asari? She asked in reply. All. When she heard that answer, she didn't know what to say. Everyone who came into the library to this day had a specific race in mind. All? Are you asking for the entire history and the entire culture of all the races in the known galaxy? Yes. She would have thought that he was joking, except for the serious look on his face. Plus, the sunglasses he wore made him look a little intimidating. It was best to keep him happy. Oh okay, the history books are on the right side of the 3rd floor and the culture books are on the left side of the 5th floor. Is that everything, sir? Yes, thank you. He walked away from the desk and rejoined of Niji and Hanabi. Right, here we go, he said to himself, taking a deep breath. He crossed his hands into a hand seal. Tajukage Bunshin no Jutsu, multiple shadow clone jutsu. He whispered under his breath. The entire front area of the library was engulfed in smoke, surprising many of the people there. When the smoke cleared, if one was to down from a higher floor, they would have seen a lot of yellow near the front door. Whoa, both Niji and Hanabi thought as they stared at the sheer number of clones. They had read about that jutsu, but to see it themselves was something else. Niji could make a few clones himself, but nothing like this. Alright, you all heard what she said, Naruto addressed the 1,000 clones standing before him. Half of you will take the history books and the other half will take the culture books. Once you're done with your book, dissipate. When you feel one of you dissipate, wait at least 5 minutes before trying to dissipate yourself. And remember to keep it down, you're in a library. The clones nodded in acknowledgement and walked away, filling the library with sounds of many feet hitting the floor. If they were less polite, they would have taken to the walls to get there fast. As they went up the stairs, the original turned around and walked out of the library despite the stunned looks he was getting. Both Niji and Hanabi quickly followed him. Hey, I thought you said that you needed to know what's gone in the past 2,000 years, Hanabi said to him as they quickly walked down the stairs. I did, I just didn't say how I was going to catch up, he replied. They walked around a corner, out of sight from the main street. Can anyone see us? He asked, coming to a stop. No, she answered, looking around and seeing no one else in sight. Good. He would have collapsed onto the ground right then and there if he hadn't placed a hand on the nearby wall to support him. His breath became a lot wheezier as he struggled to get it back. Naruto, are you okay? Niji asked, surprised but concerned. He didn't think the legend would react like that. He went to his side to help him stay up. Jews, just give me a minute, he replied, waving away his help. His legs weren't going to collapse on him but they felt weak. My chakra isn't all completely back. Summoning those clones doesn't usually make me this winded. The wheezing in his breath soon faded as he managed to find the strength to stand without support again. Okay, I'm a little better now. Are you sure? He wasn't angry at the question. He knew the man was only checking. Of course, I'm sure. I think I'd know if I was not okay. He walked back onto the main street. I'm hungry, anybody else hungry? He asked, changing the subject before either one of them could start bothering him about it. I am a little hungry too, Hanabi admitted. It was almost noon anyway. Then let's find the nearest food joint and get eating. He declared. Naruto, was that all you wanted to do today? Niji asked for clarification. Pretty much, why? The blonde asked, looking back at him. I have a message from Admiral Hackett. He wants to see you as soon as you're able. What's an admiral? He thought it was something that had to do with the sea, but he wasn't sure. Niji knew how to translate it for him. He's a jonin, Naruto, a high-ranking one. It was his decision to have you unsealed, so he would naturally want to see how you've been doing. I see. Okay, I'll go this guy. But first things first, we are having food. He walked off with both Hanabi and Niji behind him. Thankfully, he had decided to walk in the direction of where the restaurants were. After enjoying a good lunch, where Naruto stare off into the distance every 5 minutes as he processed new information, they dropped Hanabi back off at the hospital so her grandfather and mother could keep an eye on her. Both Naruto and Niji then went to the spaceport. They first walked so Naruto could keep processing the information. Once the last clone had dissipated, they took an air cab and arrived at their location shortly afterwards. So, this admiral guy is waiting for me nearby? Naruto asked as they walked through the spaceport. Some of the aliens who were there glanced their way, mostly to look at Naruto, who was unaware of the looks, but most just generally ignored them. Yes, he's waiting in the port administrator's office. He wanted some privacy when talking to you, Niji answered him. The office should be just up ahead. From what he heard, rank was used and the administrator had to obey. They kept walking until they found the port administrator's office. Two guards stood outside the door. When they saw Naruto walking up to them, they went stiff as boards, but their faces were full of stunned awe. "The Admiral is just inside, sir," one of the guards told the blonde, managing to find his voice. "He'll want to see you alone." "All right, wish me luck," he said to Neji before walking to the door, which opened automatically for him. "Man, that's weird," he thought to himself as he entered the office, the door closing behind him. Was he ever going to get used to automatic doors? Hackett turned away from the window when he heard the door close and faced the blonde. "Naruto Uzumaki, as I live and breathe," he said. "I don't think I would ever have the pleasure of meeting you." The way he spoke wasn't stunned or odd. It was simple and to the point, like the legendary blonde was just another person he was meeting. "I don't think I would have ever had the pleasure of waking up over 2,000 years in the future," Naruto replied, his tone slightly sarcastic. He couldn't help it. "Would it foolish to hope that you people have managed to come up with a good way of traveling to the past?" He shook his head. "No, we haven't. It was generally agreed not to see if we could, due to the chance of unforeseen consequences if we could do it. The number of stories written about the idea was certainly a good factor." "Yeah, I can see why you'd all say. But still." He stared past the Admiral and out the window. He could make out the city through the window. It was amazing but strange. And it was nothing like he wanted to see at the moment. "It's a nice thought. Perhaps, but that was a decision that was made long ago." He realized something as he briefly looked at the desk in the office. "I'm sorry. I would offer you a seat, but this is not my office." "That's all right. I'm used to standing when talking to my superiors. I apologized for taking my time getting here. I wanted to make sure I had gotten all the information from the library that I wanted." "Yes, Neji had informed me of what you did. Although I am a bit surprised, I would have thought that you would want all the information the library wanted." He could see the man's reasoning, but he still scowled. "Learning things by reading and studying have never been my thing. I find it's best go slow. Besides, if I wanted to know everything the library had, you wouldn't see me for a week at best, Hackett." He suddenly realized his mistake. "Aw crap, I was supposed to call you Admiral or Jonin, wasn't I?" "It's fine," he said, waving it off. "I know you're used to addressing your superiors by their names. If you're more used to that, I will not hold it against you." "Thanks. Anyway, I wanted to know what I would be dealing with when it came to different people and races, so I had clones read every book they had on history and culture." Once again, he stared out the window. "I guess that old saying is true after all." "Which old saying would that be?" The Admiral had heard many of them. "The more things change, the more they stay the same," he answered. "I had my friends seal me away so they could have peace, and yet that peace didn't last very long, did it? A war with 2 other continents took care of that." He now knew all about the War of 3 Flags. 3 continents fighting against each other just because they didn't like each other. It sounded about right for the human race. And the Unrakyo massacre, the mere thought of it made him angry and sad. What would have happened if he had been there? Hackett wasn't going to let him stay in that frame of mind. The peace may have been disrupted, but it was your dream of peace that led to reconciliation after the war and brought it back. You are honored for a lot of things, Lord Naruto. The system's alliance is the way it is because of you. The shinobi force of the military now has a motto because of you. They do. He was honestly surprised by that. He nodded. Never back down, always get back up. Naruto remembered those words quite clearly. They brought back a memory. I said that to a kid in Suna once. He was a refugee. He had lost his parents and his little brother when Obito attacked his village. He was a part of the refugees camped out in the village. He asked why we kept fighting when it was so hopeless. I told him we're shinobi. We never back down, we always get back up. He was keeping it short because he had a feeling the Admiral already knew the story. Plus, he didn't feel like going into detail. As it turned out, he was right. That kid took your words to heart, Hackett said. He became a shinobi and eventually became the Rokudame Kazekage. He lived by those words and it soon became the motto for the shinobi. He felt flattered by that. By the time he had ended the war, he had honestly felt that he hadn't done everything he could, that people would speak of him with nothing but distaste and disappointment in their voices. But to be known as the one who gave the shinobi a motto made him happy, in a small way. But he had to focus on the present. While that's cool, I must ask what kind of mission the Alliance will put me on. Hackett's face went blank. Mission? Why do you think you're being put on one? He frowned at the Admiral. I'm not as stupid as I once was, Jonan Hackett. You wouldn't have broken the seal if the Alliance didn't want something of me. And I'm fairly certain it's not to entertain news reporters and take interviews, considering how no one has really found out about me. He had dealt with people wanting to interview him during the war, but he didn't have the time and he never wanted to. The blank expression faded away and was replaced with a small smile. You would be correct, Naruto. The Alliance does have something special planned for you, but it all hinges on one thing. And what's that? If you'll rejoin the shinobi force and be a part of the Alliance military, he answered as he pulled something out from his pocket and held them out for the blonde to see. It was 2 metal tags on a metal chain. His name was inscribed on them, but that was all he could see, due to the angle of the light shining down on them. What are you talking about? Rejoin the shinobi force, he asked as he took the tags out of Hackett's hand. I never left. He put the tags around his neck. They felt cool against his shirt. I thought you might say that. There is something else. He walked over to a small chest against the wall. Naruto hadn't realized that it was there. It looked old, and the way Hackett opened it, like it was something that meant something, he could tell that it was something important. After the 4th Shinobi World War ended, the cages granted you the rank of Jonin in absentia and placed the flak jacket you were to be given inside the same chest where they kept the seal tag that would release you, Hackett told him as he pulled something out of the chest and held it out for the blonde to see. We've added a few things when you were freed, but it is still the same thing. Naruto looked down at the flak jacket in the Admiral's hands. He took it with gentle fingers. It was the same as he remembered. It was the same dark green color. The neck guard and extra shoulder padding were there, as well as the 3 scroll pouches on each of the front. The red crest of Uzushiagakuer on the back almost made him cry with happiness. But as Hackett had said, there were a few added things. He had found too, a symbol on the neck guard which was 2 bars touching each other on one end and widened at the other, leaving space to fit in the picture of the earth. The symbol was done in silver and laid over a field of black. If he had to guess, it was the symbol of the system's alliance. On the shoulders, 2 black stripes separated the top portion. Inside the stripes were 3 black bars. What does those mean? He asked, pointing with his eyes at the bars. They signify your exact rank, a commander. There had been some arguments that he should have been given a higher rank, but the fact was they didn't know if he would be for it. This was the compromise. Do you accept this jacket and what all that it entities? The Admiral asked, using the same words the Hokage once used when promoting a shinobi to Jonin rank. Naruto looked at the jacket once more. He put it on slowly, not saying a word as he slipped his arms through. He reached down and zipped it up, letting the sound fill the air. When he was done, he stood there for a few moments, getting used to the flak jacket. It feels a little stiff and heavy. But I supposed I'll get used to it, he thought to himself. I accept it fully, Admiral. He threw a somewhat sloppy salute, only because he had only seen it and not tried it himself. Hackett returned the salute. It's good to have you, Commander. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfictions. Looking forward to having you on board again.